I've got a really special guest. I'm certainly excited about this one. Dr. John Deloney from Ramsey Solutions here is with us. Dr. John, you work in the mental health space. And I really enjoy that because I think of a lot of, as a wealth advisor, having a wealth management team, we deal with certain sensitive subjects with families and individuals, such as money.
Yes.
And that can be really emotional, and I think at the root of it, money is very emotional. So for me and my team, we're here to help people do the right thing, manage the money, but really help them achieve their hopes and dreams. And that's really what our goal is. And I think so many times there's a point in a lot of our meetings where it gets to a point where my expertise stops and yours begins because money can be so emotional.
So we have one question that we ask as a society, and it distills down all the jobs I've had, all the education I have or haven't had, vacations I went on, didn't go, what my kids are doing, my spouse, all that, and it all comes down to this one question, and it's, what are you worth? And we put a dollar amount on that question in our society. And it's this, what's your value? What have you contributed to your family? And it's $1. And so that number has so much pressure and so much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we just outlined it. Not what kind of dad were you, what kind of husband were you, what kind of wife are you, what are you worth? And it's $1 amount. That's a sobering thought for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think of like the rat race.
Yeah.
When you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s trying to build your career, you're having family, having kids, and you're always trying to go and create this number and get the number bigger. And I think a lot of times we miss the importance of life in the meantime.
As it's happening. Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I want to touch on, and we were talking about this just off camera, and we were talking about this idea of retirement. And in the middle of this, I actually had to interrupt Dr. John here. I said, you know what, we got to stop this because we've got to get this on film because it was so good and everything he was saying. It's like, man, this is really good stuff that I want you to be able to present, because I don't think, especially in families and in marriages, you get to this point of retirement and you think of, okay, this is going to be the best years of our lives. And it's harder emotionally than a lot of people think, especially in our age group that we're in.
Right.
And they say that retirement is one of the biggest, could be the most stressful event in a person's life. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think number one, we have this cultural obsession with doing nothing. Like I get up in the morning and I iron my clothes the night before so that I can do nothing in the morning, or so I don't have to do that in the morning. And we call it planning and go get them, right? And then I work really hard during my day so I can get home and have dinner and put the kids to bed. So then I can finally do nothing, right? And then I work really hard all week so I get to the weekend and I can finally, I gotta mow the lawn. And then I can do nothing, right? And then I get done from church and then I can do nothing. And then we go at a macro level and we do that with work. I'm gonna put 50 years of my life in a thing for this reward, which we've convinced ourselves is so wonderful, and it's this idea to do nothing, or do whatever I quote unquote want, right? And so what I always challenge folks to do is to step back from this notion of joy is over there, happiness is somewhere, happiness is anywhere where you're not, and that's just not true. If we will be still and be present, it forces us to have uncomfortable conversations. It forces us to be honest about our financial situation, our role we're playing at work, our role in our homes. But it's the good, holy work of being joyful and being okay with just being who you are in your own skin, wherever you're at.
Yeah.
When you meet rare people like that, they just have this peace aura about them because they just are good with where they are, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing about retirement is we speak in words, but we think in pictures. And so we all say the word retirement all the time. We don't actually do the hard work of painting a picture of what's that actually going to look like and reverse engineering it backwards. And so we have this idea of, I won't have to go to work and then I can do whatever I want. And that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, where are we going to live? What is our meals going to actually look like? Are you going to be happy on a Tuesday after not doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's doing the hard work of saying, what is the ages 60, 70, 80, what does it actually look like? What am I going to be doing in those days? We were made to work, man. We were made to have a purpose, to have a role in our homes, in our communities, in this destination of, I can finally do whatever I want. We're just not wired that way, man. It's just not the way we are innately made. Yeah. And so you get this collision when you get 60 and you're like, all right, I can do nothing. And your body goes, all right, good, I'm out because I'm done, right? And so if you look at the stats of people who retire, their bodies fall apart. Their hearts and minds fall apart just because we're not made to just be purposeless.
Yeah, I like that. And, so many times we have we're not going to do list. These things, I'm not going to wake up at this time because I don't have to, or I don't have to do this, or I don't have to do this. Right. And then you get all these do not wants, and then you realize there's so much time and you didn't really take the time to think, but what do I want to do?
Right.
It's all these things I don't want to do. And I think, with our team, we want to help create a little bit or get people to think about the things that they want to do to make their life more fulfilling.
Right.
And if we can help them on the financial side, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily bring the peace that you talked about just a minute ago, having that purpose life. And there's only so much that number that we talked about can bring, but it can't bring everything.
No, and you don't want to be 60 and have $2.3 million in assets and nobody to share that with.
Yeah.
Or kids that have gotten the message that your work's more important than they are, and they've created their own lives somewhere else. Or that you wake up, this happens a lot with empty nesters, with parents I would work with whose last kid just gone to college. And they look across the table and they're like, well, I have no idea who you are, right? Because our identities have been in our kids, our identities have been in work or escapism, or we'll deal with that later. Well, later's here, man, right? Yeah. And so answer the question of what are you worth is never a number. It's always who have you loved and who have you let love you. And man, then retirement, this mythical notion of retirement looks totally different.
Yeah.
Right. Then you can be really happy in the same house, and you can be really happy sharing experiences or giving or volunteering or having this whole, my mom's 70 now, she's had this whole back half of her life that you couldn't even have imagined she was going to have, because she kept being curious and she kept going to classes and kept listening to new teachers, and now she's living this crazy wild, she's gonna peel into her funeral with no tread left on the tires, and that's awesome, man, right?
Yeah.
But she's living into a picture, not just living out of I don't want to fill in a blank.
Yeah. What are the pitfalls, or maybe what are the mistakes you see more often than not from either couples, marriages, families on how they deal with that?
I think that most of us, most of the time, live in a fantasy world on how much something actually costs. Of one day we're just going to get $1 million, or retirement just automatically happens to us. Cars just pay themselves off. Student loans just pay themselves off. My kids will just figure that out. We just don't. We live wholly unintentional lives. We just get about the busyness and the routine of finishing today just so we can get to tomorrow. And so if I had to distill it down to one thing, it's people just live unintentionally. One, we weren't trained to be intentional. Two, everything we have in our lives is pushing us towards not being intentional.
Yeah.
And so we're just in this don't feel, don't think, somebody else will do it for us. And then all of a sudden, man, you get around money and that exposes you.
Yeah.
Right? Time and money, those, like Dave Ramsey always says, I can tell who you are by where you spend your money and what your calendar says.
Yeah.
And that's true, man.
And in marriages and family, a lot of times what we see in our meetings is, one spouse has an idea of how they want to spend, the household income. The other spouse has another idea.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean one of them's right or wrong. It's just different.
Right. And you've got to, when you commit your life when you commit your life to somebody forever, man, it's easy to commit fidelity, and it's easy to commit co-parenting, and it's easy to commit even co-chores, even though guys are terrible at that. It's really hard to commit co-finances because, like you said, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where I know what you value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just exposing.
Even with us having a family now and having a little girl, there are certain things that are very, very important to my wife that I'm like, I think we can get by not having that. But it causes us to have the conversation and really get on a deeper level.
Yep.
Now I'm understanding where she's coming from. And to your point, it's kind of like some people just don't talk, and it's easier not to talk than it is and get uncomfortable.
Or to go back to something I said earlier, we so often think in pictures, but we speak in words. Here's a good example of that. So let's say my wife comes in on a Monday and she says, hey, this Friday, you and me, we're going on an incredible date. And she winks at me and walks away. Dude, right? So Monday, I'm excited, thinking about what I'm gonna wear, where we're gonna go. Tuesday, I'm thinking about what she's gonna wear. By Wednesday, dude, I'm wondering where we're gonna drop the kids off because we're gonna get on a plane and end up at some crazy hotel somewhere, right? By Thursday, I'm not even sleeping anymore. And I come racing home from work on Friday, and she's like, you're late, let's go, our date. And I see her and she's wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I'm like, what are you doing? I thought we were going on a date. And she's like, I am. We're going to Taco Barn and I'm having 7 burritos tonight and I'm going to be in bed by 9 and it's going to be awesome. We both said the word date, and my picture was some romantic rendezvous, and her picture was one-on-one time with my husband. We're going to laugh and get salsa all over our faces. We're both going to go to bed early because we're exhausted. And both of us love the other things, but we just had different pictures in our head.
Yeah.
And so now I sit down and say, hey, what's your picture for this date on Friday? And she'll say, dude, this. I'm all in. It's awesome, but we're connected in that way. What a budget does is when your wife says, I got to get some stuff for the baby. You think some diapers and a rattle, $30.
The needs, right? Just the needs.
And she thinks stuff like, I'm going to repaint the wall. We're going to knock this wall out and build a new, right? I mean, so... It's, hey, what's your picture of the baby's room? And we're going to co-create that together. And that's why people who go through like financial peace, or they find that their marriage is better on the back end because they've had to create pictures together. And then most people, most of the time, are in. I just, it's the disappointment when I realize my picture's not what your picture was. That's what we get frustrated about.
Yeah.
Right.
And usually shut down.
I shut down. My default setting is to withdraw. And I'll sit through the taco dinner like this. And then I'll order extra queso just because I eat my sadness, because I'm an old Church of Christ kid. I'll eat my sadness, and then the next day I'll feel like crap, and then I'll be grumpy, and then my kids will get, right? It just starts this whole spiral, right? And all that could have been up front with, hey, what's your picture of the date on Friday?
Yeah.
Hey, what's your picture what's your picture of taking care of baby? What's your picture of we're 60? Let's dream together. What does that look like for us?
Yeah.
And man, you can just reverse engineer that backwards. And most of the time, barring a pandemic or something, you can create a path, and you just got to walk the path at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what would be good advice for somebody listening or watching and saying, yeah, I've had that before. I know what he's talking about. I get that. What would be the advice of saying, hey, now what do you do with that? How do you combat that? How do you work around that, knowing that?
I think it's to ultimately demystify the process. And this was a great example of that was in the ESPN Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan. Is I knew Michael Jordan as a kid flying around dunking the ball. That gave me a good insight as to Michael Jordan in the weight room when everyone else was gone. And Michael Jordan taking free throws after everybody was gone. It's just practice, it's repetition, it's doing it over and over. And when we get married, we think that we're just supposed to know how to be married. And when a kid all of a sudden comes home from the hospital, we think we're just like supposed to know how to be parents. And that's a myth, it's a fantasy. And it doesn't feel sexy, and it doesn't feel like empowering to sit down and say, honey, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Let's
figure out today together, right? So the two things I always tell married couples, especially young married couples, and especially folks about to enter big transitions, about to have a kid, about to send the first kid to college, about to retire, is to make a commitment to have a daily conversation that says, what's today look like? What's the picture of today look like for you?
Yeah.
What's it look like for me? And then to do what you, like every week, like a Sunday night in our house is, let's do a calendar meeting for the week, and let's do a picture of the week look like.
Yeah.
And that way when my wife says, hey, I'm gonna need some space on Wednesday, For me, space may include, but you're still going to make dinner and be home and put the kids to bed, and then you're going to need about half an hour at the end of the night. Space for her means at noon, I'm moving away for the next day,
and
right?
You're doing all those
got
things.
Dinner and right. And so, man, when I know that on Sunday, I can mentally prepare for that. I can maybe get some work done on Monday and Tuesday, so I can have Wednesday open. It's awesome because we're on the same team, right? But it comes back to practicing relationship. And that, just remembering that as a word. None of us know how to do it. Our parents weren't trained to do it. Their parents weren't trained to do it. And so it's just being the generation that stops that cycle and just says, I'm going to practice being in a relationship. I'm going to practice being vulnerable. And I'm going to practice asking you, how can I make your day better? What's your picture of today look like? And here's what my picture is.
Yeah.
And man, you start doing that and couples just find themselves weaving together. And then you get these weird sticks, like in forks in the road, like, I want Spanish tile. Well, I want wood floors. Man, you solve that nonsense, right? Because those are details, man. Those aren't existential issues about who are we going to be and what's our future going to look like.
Yeah. When you're at a certain income level and all of a sudden it's what we call sudden wealth. Maybe somebody comes into a large inheritance.
Right.
Maybe it's a situation where it's an unfortunate passing of the spouse and there's life insurance proceeds that come in. And all of a sudden it can escalate somebody from this financial situation to that situation.
Right.
And it can be very tough to deal with on an emotional level. I'd love to hear kind of any maybe advice you'd have for somebody that just escalates their situation and they're not accustomed to.
So I would actually drop that into two different categories. One is the grief one, and then one is the fall from the sky.
Okay.
And so what I notice people doing a lot in any situation, but especially around somebody who passes, life transitions, job loss, etc., is we are wired to solve the problem. Men are the worst.
Yep.
Like, let me fix it, right? Let's solve this. And what I always find myself pushing people back is to slow down and actually grieve the transition. And so if somebody has if their husband dies and leaves them $1 million, we've taken calls on the Dave Ramsey show. It's like, hey, my husband died last week. I've got this $1 million check sitting here. Should I go ahead and pay off the house? And our first thing is always, you do nothing, right? Stop. Grieve the loss of your husband, right? Grieve the loss of your kid's dad. Be a part of that. And then as you grieve, you transition to a final stage of you begin to make meaning of your relationship. And that's when you start painting a picture of what tomorrow's going to look like. And then you've got this money to help fund that picture. But if you start going into solving it, that's people who burn through $1 million in 6 months, right? They invest in this and they do this, and their financial broker calls and says, you know what you should do with that? You should, and it's gone, right? Yeah. And then they haven't grieved yet, and that grief will hit you at some point. And it's better to do it when we call it leakage in counseling. You can deal with it, or it will deal with you, and usually at a real inopportune time, it makes its way out, right? And so then the other side of it is when money just falls from the sky, you just start doing. Again, it becomes unintentional. Now I can get a car, I can get this house, I can do this thing, instead of stopping and painting a picture of where you want to go, and then just walking that path, right? So it all comes back to intentionality when it just falls from the moon for you. I tell 18-year-olds this, I tell 60-year-olds this. The worst part about any life transition is that you go with you. And if you were a jerk with $25,000 in the bank, you will be a jerk on steroids with $1 million in the bank. And if you were a great steward and you were kind and you treated the woman at Burger King with respect when you made $15 an hour, you will be kind and super generous when you have $1 million. And so doing the hard work of who you are all the time is that's just the rhythm of life. It's being good with where you're sitting right now, not waiting for some other there. There is no there, Tommy. It doesn't exist. There's no there, right? It's not there. So be present, and then $1 million falls out of the sky. You're slow, you're intentional, you rejoice, you give, and then you're really able to savor that fortune.
Well, hey, I appreciate it. It's been awesome having you on here.
Thank you all. I appreciate you guys for sticking with us.
And Dr. John, will you let our audience know just if people hear this and are like, man, this is great, feel like Dr. John's speaking to me, where can they find you more of your stuff, man?
I'm on the interwebs now, which is a whole new, on the internets, which is a whole new thing. You can follow me at John Deloney, and I think johndeloney.com, and then I co-host the Dave Ramsey Show with Dave, usually a couple days a week, talking about mental health and relationships issues, and so you can catch me on the Dave Ramsey Show as well.
Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed this, gotten something out of it, and again, if you want to see more of Dr. John, please look him up on the interwebs.
Yes.
And just appreciate
YouTube/John Deloney.
There you go.
I got the tubes too now. I'm learning all kinds of things. My wife tells me I was born in the wrong century.
It kind of sounds like you were a little bit.
My watch has numbers on it. I mean,
That's right. Yeah. But hey, everybody, we appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.